Alright, so these are the official rules for Quartermaster General, the base game. This is a World War II teams game. We've got two teams which compete each other. We've got the Allies, namely United States, United Kingdom, and USSR, versus the Axis, Germany, Japan, and Italy. Each of these countries has a specific amount of cards that they can use. However, their decks are not of equivalent size. For example, USA, because they have a strong economy, so they have lots of cards, while on the other hand, Italy, they don't have so good economy, so they don't have so many cards. Each country has a specific amount of armies and navies that they can use. Some have more, some have fewer. This is a victory points game, so you score points for your team. Germany plays first. They score some points for the Axis, so the Axis marker goes up by those respective points. UK is the next to play, and they score some points for the Allies. Japan is next, and they score some points for the Axis. At the end of the US turn, we have to advance the round marker by 1. At the end of the 20th round, the team with the most points wins the game. Nevertheless, if at the end of the US turn, one team has 30 or more points than the other, then that team immediately wins the game. Each team begins with an army at their home space, but they may build more armies and navies during the game, as long as they still have available pieces to build them. So if they have already used all of their available pieces, such as in this example, the Italians have already used all of the 4 armies, and if they want to build the 5th army right now, they cannot do so. At any point of the game, though, you're allowed to take any piece from the board back to your supply so that it can become available again. So if the Italians want to build an army in Russia, right now they cannot do so because they don't have an available piece, but they may take this off the board. Now it becomes available again, and if they do have a card which allows them to build an army in Russia, then now they can do so. Each country can only have a maximum of 1 piece per space. So Italy, in this example, they cannot build a further army here because they already have an army there. Also, if a space is occupied by the enemy, you cannot build an army there. Let's say that the UK is in control of Western Europe, then Italy can't build in Western Europe right now. Nevertheless, they are allowed to build in Germany because you're allowed to build in territories that are already in control of one of your teammates. So teammates are fine to have more than 1 piece in a territory, but nobody can have more of 1 piece of their color in any territory. Alright, so at any point of the game, any piece is either in supply or not in supply. In order for a piece to be in supply, it has to trace a line of its own countries, armies, and or navies to a supply space. A supply space is a space which has a star on it. So for example, this Italian piece, this army is in supply because it's in a territory which has a star on it. This American piece is in supply for the very same reason. But This American piece right now is not in supply. Nevertheless, this American piece is in supply because it's adjacent to a territory which already has an American army, and that territory has a star on it. So, for example, if the US had a navy there, then again this navy is in supply because it's adjacent to this, which has an American army and it has a star on it. There's one additional requirement for navies to be in supply. For a navy to be in supply, it has to be at a sea space which is adjacent to a territory which already has an army of your own or an army of your allies. So this navy is in supply because it's adjacent to a territory which has an army on it, and it also meets the first rule that it's adjacent to this territory which has an American army which has a star on it, so it's in supply. This navy is also in supply because it's adjacent to this, which is adjacent to this, which has a star on it, and it's also adjacent to this, which is controlled by the United Kingdom, which has an army built there, and the United Kingdom is an ally of USA. This is not in supply because even though it can trace back to a territory with a star on it, this piece is not adjacent to an allied army. If this was already built there, then this would be in supply because it's adjacent to a territory that has an allied army on it, and this is also in supply because this is adjacent to this, which is adjacent to this, which is adjacent to this, which has a star on it. Alright, so at the very beginning of the game, each player draws 10 cards from their deck, and they can inspect them. So let's say you are Italy, then you can draw 10 cards from your deck, inspect them, and you have to choose exactly 3 of them to discard. So let's say that you decide to discard these 3 cards. Then you place them face up on your discard pile. So from now on, this will be your discard pile. Only the top card is viable to others. So others don't know what are the cards below this card on your discard pile. Also, your hand is only known to you. You're not allowed to discuss your cards even with your teammates, even though you're allowed to discuss general strategy with your teammates. So you may say, okay, I want to attack this country, can you help me? If I control this territory, can you do something over there? You're allowed to discuss these things. So during your turn, you have to play 1 card if you still have available cards. If you don't have any cards left, then there is no requirement to play a card. But if you do have cards, then it's mandatory to play a card. But let's see what cards you can play. So most of these cards are played by putting them directly on your discard pile and doing the action of that card. So the first thing that you can do is play a build army card. When you play a build army card, it means that you can build an army which is adjacent to one of your already in supply armies or navies. If you are Italy, then you can build an army there, or even there, because remember that you can share ownership of a territory with one of your teammates. Similarly, if you want to play a build army card instead of a build army card, then you can build a navy. In this example, you can only build a navy here because this sea space is the only sea space which is adjacent to one of your armies in supply, one of your pieces in supply. Let's say that that in your first turn you build a navy there, and next turn you want to build an army, then this time you may build this army here because it's adjacent to a navy of yours which is in supply. If you want to play a land battle card, then it means that you are attacking, you want to battle an enemy unit which is adjacent to a unit of yours which is in supply. So if the UK has already built an army there in Western Europe, then you can play a land battle card to battle them from Italy using your army. So when you battle them, this gets destroyed immediately. It's out of the board. It doesn't matter whether you attack them with an army or with a navy, as long as you have a land battle card. Similarly, if you want to attack an enemy navy, then all you need to have is a sea battle card. So let's say that you want to play a sea battle card because the UK has a navy in the Mediterranean and you want to play that sea battle to attack that navy with your army. You play that sea battle and this navy is off the board. All cards are limited because once you have played all of your cards, then you can't really do much. But especially these 4 cards are very useful. So you should be wise and use them appropriately. And remember that they're limited. Right, so if you want to play an event card, then it goes directly to your discard pile and you say apply an event card, you read its text, and you do the action described. So this event card says eliminate an allied army in Italy. Let's assume that your home space was occupied by a UK army. Then if you play this event card, you can eliminate this army. Status cards are played face up in front of you, so they're known to everyone once you play them, and they stay there forever unless this is somehow destroyed by an enemy. And you can use the effect of this status card again and again and again. So generally speaking, it's wise if you try to play a status card as early as possible so that you can use their effect again and again and again, many times. So in this example, if you play this status card in front of you, then it says that during the victory step of your turn, you gain +1 victory points for each Italian navy on the board. So if you have a navy there, then this gives you an extra victory points. We will discuss in a few minutes how you can get victory points. Right. Another kind of card that you can play is economic warfare. These cards are played in order to have an enemy discarding some cards of theirs from their draw deck. Remember, this is your draw deck. this is your hand, this is your discard pile. So let's see this card. In this example, it says that the United Kingdom may discard the top card of its draw deck, and Italy gains +1 victory point. So if you're Italy, and let's say Axis have already scored 5 points, then by playing this card, you also score an extra victory points, plus some other victory points that you will score during your turn. And UK, they have to discard a card from their draw deck. Why is this good for you? Because remember that each country has a specific amount of cards. So if they discard all of their cards, then eventually they won't have any cards to play anymore. Furthermore, if they have 0 cards left and they have to discard more cards, then that country will lose 1 point for each card that they were supposed to discard, but they cannot do so because they don't have any cards left. So this will go backwards. Finally, you may want to play a response card. So response cards are played face down in front of you. So if you choose that the one card that you will play during your turn is a response card, you say a player response, so you take it from your hand and you put it face down in front of you. So this will stay there until the action which is described here is triggered. In this example, this response card says ignore an economic warfare card with bombing. In the title, played against Italy. So if USA plays economic warfare card against you, then at that point you will say response blah 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 blah. I have to ignore your economic warfare card which you played against me, so I don't have to discard any cards this time. After your response card is triggered, then this gets discarded as well. You should remember that you can only use your response card as an immediate reaction to something which happens. So if later on, if you decide to not use this card right now, then later on it's too late. If you say, oh, in the previous turn you did this, which triggered my reaction, the reaction of the response card, it will be too late. So this, after its use, it will be discarded. Alright, so at the very beginning of your turn, you may decide that instead of playing one card from your hand, let's say that this is your hand, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards, and you are desperate, you really have to use a built army card, and you don't have any built army cards on your hand now. So at the very beginning of your turn, you may decide that instead of playing one card from your hand, you choose to discard exactly 4 cards from your hand. Let's say this one. So you choose to discard them in order to search your draw deck for one of the 4 basic cards. So land battle, sea battle, build navy, and build army. These are the 4 basic cards. So you search your draw deck, and if you still have one of these available, then you can take one of them. So you say I discard 4 of my cards from my hand to take one build army card from my draw deck. Then you have to shuffle your draw deck again so that you don't know what's coming next. And because you've taken this build army, you should shuffle this properly many times. And because you've taken that build army card from your draw deck, then you have to use it immediately. So you play that card, and you may build an army somewhere. So equivalently, you may have chosen to play a build navy card, which would mean that you should have immediately built a navy somewhere, or land battle, or sea battle. There is one distinction between build and recruit. So some cards of yours may say build an army there. But if you want to build that army over there, then you need to have an adjacent army in supply to the space where when you plan to build that army or navy. So let's say that you are Italy again, and you have an event card which says build an Italian army in Balkans. Then yes, you can build that army there right now because you already have an army in Italy which is in supply and adjacent to the space where you want to build the new army. But if you have an event card which says build an army in Ukraine, right now you cannot build an army over there. But if you already have an army in Balkans, which is in supply because it's adjacent to this, which has an army and it has a star on it, and then you want to use that event card which says build an army in Ukraine, then yes, you can do so. For your home space, and only for your home space, you're allowed to use one of your build army cards from your hand as your play step to build an army there. If you lost that army, if you don't control your capital anymore and it's unoccupied, then you can play one build army card to build there directly. However, if the enemy occupies your capital, then you can't build over there. So recruit means that you can build an army on the space described by the event card, or whatever card that's the card that you want to use, even if you're not next to that space. So for example, if you have an event card which says recruit an Italian army in North Africa, then yes, you can recruit it, because even though right now it's not in supply, but you're allowed to recruit it. If it said build an army in North Africa, then you wouldn't be able to do so unless, let's say that you had a navy here, which is in supply and adjacent to this, so that you could build an army there. Equivalently, there's also a distinction between battle and eliminate. So if you have one card which says battle an allied army in the Balkans, then yes, you can battle them, because right now you have an army an army in supply adjacent to the Balkans, so you could battle them. But if the card said battle an allied army in Ukraine, then in this example you couldn't battle them because you don't have an Italian army in supply adjacent to Ukraine. But if you did have an army in Balkans, then yes, you could battle the Russian army in Ukraine. Eliminate means that the enemy army can be eliminated directly even if you're not adjacent to it. So for example, if you have a card which says eliminate a Russian army in Ukraine, even though you're not next to it, you can get this off the board immediately. Okay, so now I will explain you the straits. So this symbol here means that this C space is adjacent to this, because you can see these arrows here and this anchor icon, but only for one team at a time. The straits are open only for one team at a time. For the allies, the straits are open if nobody occupies the territory with the anchor on it. So if this territory is unoccupied, then for the allies, the Mediterranean Sea is adjacent to the North Sea. So if the allies already have a navy there, then they can use that navy to battle an Italian navy in the Mediterranean Sea, because for the allies, this is adjacent to this. For the Axis, the straits are open if an Axis player occupies this. So if the German player had an army here, then now the straits are open to the Axis. So the Allies cannot battle this, but the Axis are allowed, if they have the card, to battle this from here. Because for the Axis now, this is adjacent to this. So let's review again. For the Allies, the requirement is that this space is not occupied by the enemy. So either it's unoccupied or the Allies occupy this space. For the Axis, it's a must that one of the Axis players has to occupy this space. So there are several straits. This one, this one, this one, and this one. Also, I should clarify something. So here, the Western United States are not adjacent to North Pacific, because if you look at this line closely, it goes up to Pacific Northwest. So Western United States is adjacent to East Pacific, which is adjacent to North Pacific. Furthermore, the Balkans are not adjacent to Middle East, and Mediterranean Sea is not adjacent to Black Sea. Because the Earth is spherical, so you can go from Eastern United States to Western United States, and from Pacific Northwest to Canada, etc., etc. So let's see what happens during your turn. This is the turn sequence. So when it's your turn, first of all, you should play a card. Remember that as long as you do have at least one card on your hand, you have to play exactly one card from your hand. Then, during the supply step, you have to check whether any piece of yours is out of supply. So let's suppose that the German player has an army there. Then during the supply step, this gets out of the board, because anything which is not in supply during the supply step has to go out of the board. If this was the situation at the end of the German turn, and during the turn of Russia has an army here, and they battle this, then this is out of supply, but it doesn't get destroyed now, because we have to wait until it's Germany's turn again, because during Germany's turn, in the play step, maybe Germany will build an army here, because this is in supply, which is adjacent to this, so they can use an army there, so that this is still in supply during the supply step. Of course, remember that if this was the situation, you wouldn't be allowed to build an army here because this is not in supply. Then it's the victory step. So for your victory step, you have to score 2 points for each territory with a star on it that you are in control. 1 point if you share the ownership with one of your teammates. So let's say that this is the current situation. Germany scores 2 points for controlling this, plus 1 for sharing the ownership of Western Europe. So they score 3 points. And remember that you have to use the victory points markers. You may also get extra victory points for having a status card that allows you to receive extra victory points. So, for example, this status card says that during the victory step of your turn, gain +1 victory points if either Russia or Ukraine is occupied by an Italian army. So if you do have an Italian army in Ukraine, you also score an extra victory point. If your home space is occupied by the enemy, then you don't score any points at all, unless you play a card which gives you victory points immediately. But any points that you would receive during your victory step, so points for controlling stars and territories with stars, or points from status cards that say that during your victory step you gain some extra points for meeting some requirements, then you don't receive such points anymore. Then we've got the discard step. So the discard step means that you're allowed to discard any cards from your hand. So you're supposed to have 7 cards at the beginning of your turn. You have to play 1 card during the play step. So you're left with 6 cards. If you want, you can discard 1, 2, or even 6 cards from your hand, and they go directly to your discard pile. Maybe you decide to discard 0 cards. Then, finally, the draw step means that you have to draw some cards from your draw deck so that your hand has exactly 7 cards again. So if you only play 1 card and you don't discard any cards, you just have to draw 1 card. If you play 1 card and you also discard 2 cards, then you need to draw 3 cards so that your hand has 7 cards again. Some very general tips for each nation so that you know what's going on even if you don't control that nation. Let's begin with the US. US is the most strong nation here. They have some very good status cards. They are fine if they discard several cards during the game. Of course, they shouldn't overdo it, but generally speaking, it should be fine because they have so many cards. They should make a decision whether they want to go against Germany and Italy or whether they want to go against Japan. Sometimes they try to equally divide their troops. The UK has some special cards which allow them to build in other places, such as in India or Australia. But they should take into consideration that they don't have so many build army or land battle cards, so they may build elsewhere, but they should also protect their capital, because if their capital falls, they won't be scoring any points. Russia, most of the times they have to fight for their lives because they will be attacked by Germany and Italy together. Russia has lots of build army cards. They can build and build again and again. Germany is the strongest Axis nation. They also have some good status cards. The best of them is Blitzkrieg, which allows them to battle an enemy unit and immediately build one of their own units at the place where they battled the enemy unit. UK has one special card, Enigma, which allows them to destroy one of the enemy status cards. Usually they choose to destroy Blitzkrieg. Germany has lots of land battle cards as well, so even though they may not necessarily score lots of points, but they can attack many enemy armies at different places. Italy isn't that they don't have so many armies and navies. Nevertheless, they can score several victory points by playing some good status cards, which allow them to score extra points for occupying some territories or for having some navies on the board. They should try to cooperate with Germany. They should coordinate well, and they should either go against Russia, against the UK perhaps. They should try to support them, play some response cards which will help Germany. Japan feels a bit different to play with because they have lots of response cards. They don't have so many land battle cards or build army cards. They have the fewer land battle cards, so they try to use the response cards in order to occupy places without having to play their build army or land battle cards. One more thing that you should know is that you are allowed to battle an empty space. Why would you do that? Maybe because it triggers one of your response cards. So maybe you have a response card that says if you battle that space, then you're allowed to build an army in an adjacent space. So even if that space is not occupied by the enemy, maybe you want to battle that empty space so that you can trigger the response of the action of your response card, and thus you can receive the benefit of your response card. So that's all. I hope that you've enjoyed this and you are about to have some good time playing Quartermaster General.